descriptions of legal structures for business models that you should be thinking about. These are not business models, they're just legal structures. So this is in your book on page 13. So you have two, you have nonprofit, you have for-profit, and you have the hybrid model. We talked about this a little bit in the Shift workshop, that this hybrid area is starting to expand more. But for the most part, the really only two legal options that you have are to be nonprofit or for-profit. You can be a benefit corporation, but it doesn't have any legal standing. There are some state-by-state options for you, but it doesn't come with any tax benefits. There's nothing really legally, federally legally different right now. So you're either nonprofit and for-profit. And there are some reasons to be nonprofit, and there are some reasons to be for-profit. The easy one that people like to think about with the nonprofit status is the tax exemption. You don't pay taxes. And that is both a good thing and a bad thing on some levels. So there's some really interesting conundrums about being tax exempt. It sounds like such a great deal. Oh, if I don't have to pay any taxes, then I get to keep all the profit. Well, it's not that simple at all. And it's pretty darn complicated, and there are so many loopholes and sides to this that keep you from accessing a lot of the tools that exist on the for-profit side. So if any of you are thinking about the nonprofit side, ignore the college, because you have no choice. You have to be this, and we have to live potentially in here, in this hybrid version, because we're sort of in between. We're a nonprofit, but we have a social enterprise as part of us. But if you're considering being a nonprofit at this point as a business, and many artists think that this is a great way to go down, because you think, oh, we can get grants, we can get funders will give us money because they'll just want to give us things, and if we're really good at what we do, we can potentially benefit from all these people who donate money, and I could take donations. It is not that simple. The amount of administration that you have to put into this is quite overwhelming. So this is a much easier, safer way to imagine starting out. And part of what you see changing nationally on the nonprofit world is the nonprofit world is having to go back and really look at their business models and look at why they were not being as financially stable as a for-profit business has been. You know, being for good is not just enough. You know, actually exploring what the value is, your value proposition as a nonprofit entity, even if you're doing good. I mean, look at Bill Strickland. Clearly, he was doing the nonprofit version. He certainly lives in this space to a certain degree, but he was taking million-dollar gifts. Now, corporations can make donations that are not from a foundation, and that can be a marketing expense for them. They can write it off either as a donation, as a charitable contribution, or they can write it off as a marketing expense. It all depends on how you want to slice up your taxes at the end of the year, because you want to spend as much as you make so that you don't have any profit at the end that you pay taxes on. So there are lots of games that can be played back and forth, but for the most part, for you all, staying in this for-profit space is really probably a safe place for you to be, and making sure that you are clear about your personal liability in your business is also, have you guys talked about this with Danny or Carrie? Is there any talk about LLCs and the different legal protections or anything like that yet?
We haven't had a conversation with them.
Okay. So don't worry, nothing bad has happened. But there are different ways that you can slice up how you run your business, and depending on whether what your life goals are, whether you're married, whether you have kids, all those things can play into which of these models matters to you. And I highly, highly, highly recommend that you go to SBA.gov to look at the different options and understand the legal definitions and differences between being an LLC, a sole proprietor, an S or C corporation, because this is expensive. There's a lot of paperwork and a lot to be filed in here. It's way easier to just be your own sole proprietorship, and it depends on, honestly, the amount of assets that you have right now. And you know, the bad news in the business world is if somebody were to sue you, can they take your house? What can they take of yours that you have? So you want to try and not have that stuff that you own. Like, you don't want to have, although it's hard to rationalize this, you want to get as much of your equipment and things protected, but not have the things that are valuable to you personally, your house, your car, the things that are going to keep you alive for the long term. Those shouldn't be associated with your business, so that you don't accidentally lose them for some crazy thing that happens, you know, because life is crazy. So go to SBA.gov, consult a lawyer if you need to, but make sure that you're thinking about those things. Now,
It's actually a service that the SBDC office, Small Business Development Center staff will provide you with, so that you don't have to pay for the legal advice. They're not attorneys, but what they will tell you is that generally they recommend you start out as a sole proprietor unless you have a reason to believe that your product will open you up to potential litigation. So if you're producing something small that can be swallowed by a child, LLC. You are producing something that they will consume, food, LLC. If you're just weaving blankets and you know you really don't want to go through
they put it over their heads and suffocate.
Suffocation.
LLC.
basically
Strangulate.
They eat
it.
You burn yourself.
And the thing about it, so that's from like the legal liability standpoint. From the tax standpoint, you can be an LLC and opt to be taxed as a sole proprietor. The IRS is a smart organization. It's figured out how it's going to get its money either way.
Either way.
Really, the designation comes down to the legal liability. And the SBDC will talk to you about that. So if it's a conversation you want to have, you know, and I can give you their contact information.
Awesome. So from legal structure, then you're thinking about business models. And this is where we started in the Shift Workshop with some gray stuff related to licensing, because this and intellectual property is a road for Christmas cards and other things that may be replicable, that offer some opportunities for passive income depending on how comfortable you are as an artist in licensing your work. And the things that you can license are endless. It can be demonstrations. You could license the method that you use to teach people how to demonstrate. That could be something that Steve could license. Absolutely your methods that you use, and certainly your products, are all things that have the potential for licensing. And licensing can be in different forms, but think of it this way. Licensing is agreeing that you want to replicate an individual piece of your work, but you don't really want to make it 100 times. You want somebody else to produce it. So you want them to replicate it, and you want them to take all the risk. You want them to produce it. So you give them a license to reproduce your product. They put in all the money to produce it, and you negotiate with them the percentage of the sale that you get. So you didn't have to go make 10,000 copies, because imagine what that would cost for you, of your cards and envelopes and packaging around it. The licensing company does all of that for you, but you get whatever percentage you can negotiate with them of the sale. And depending on who you're working with on the manufacturing end of things, it could be that they will absolutely try and talk you into giving a one-time sale price for your product. Don't do that. Don't allow that to happen. You want the residuals. Even though it seems tempting to take the $5,000 that they offer you, if you know that over time it's going to be $25,000, but it's going to be coming in little increments, you want that long game because it's financially so much better. It may not solve your problem right tomorrow. It's not a silver bullet that, you know, allows you to buy a new car that you need, but for the long term, it's a much safer position for you to be in. And you have a deeper relationship with that manufacturer who then may want more of your stuff. Because if it sells well, then they're gonna come back to you for another design. So this is a way to find your happy place because of where your beliefs are and where you're trying to go with your career, about whether you feel good about producing something that's going to be replicated by someone other than you. How you feel about whether that's a sellout moment or whether that's okay with you. All of those things are tied up in licensing. But for sure, at this point in time, anybody who's a creative should be at least looking at it somewhat seriously to see, is there a piece of this that could allow me the financial freedom to do the one-of-a-kind work that I want to do more, because I have some passive income that I can count on that's coming in. And even though it's not being sold for $10,000, and I truly believe that my product is worth $10,000, but no one has bought it for $10,000, by the way, if I can have somebody else take the risk and replicate it and sell it at a price that is not the same price as the original was worth, maybe that's worth it to you, because it gives you a platform of diversified revenue that means you're not as dependent on that $10,000 sale, that one-time $10,000 sale. This is smaller pieces.
What is the difference between licensing and copyright? I mean, if you license something, aren't you saying that this is an original piece that's being manufactured, or is it your original piece that you're licensing?
It's your original piece that you're licensing.
But you don't own the rights to it.
No, you
As
would
far as the
still, you
copyright.
still own the rights, because otherwise you can't license it. So you own the copyright, you're giving a license to a manufacturing company to use your design for a price. And your price is somewhere between 0 and a percentage, or a flat fee, or whatever it is that you end up negotiating. But you keep the rights. Now, that said, in the world of licensing, manufacturing, this is why you need a lawyer for this sort of thing, if you're getting into anything large, because you want somebody protecting you, because the manufacturer is going to try and get the best deal they can get, just like you're going to try and get the best deal you can get on all of this. So some manufacturers will try and buy you out. That's what those one-time fees are, where you basically, you're selling your original work, but you no longer own it. So it's not really a license, it's just that you sold them the ability to use it. And you get nothing long term. Now, there's everywhere in between. So, you know, every lawyer and every company is gonna figure out a deal. So we don't have to solve the deal here, but for you all, it is a viable place to be thinking about. Fees for services, all of you all who are creatives have the opportunity to be workshopping, demonstrating, doing custom work in ways that are different than a product that you're making that is a one-of-a-kind, unique thing that you're selling for retail. There's wholesale, there's small sales, there's large sales. I mean, for you all, there is a whole host of ways that you can skin the cat of running your business, and the mix of licensing versus retail sales versus wholesale clients, that's what helps find you a stable spot that allows you to diversify, so that if one of those pieces falls apart, you don't end up in the crunch of cash flow where you're missing your rent money or whatever the heck it is.
It also reaches different markets. I have different customers, and I read something today that talked about millennials are having less kids. And spending items on homes and cars, but are spending more to go out and eat and to do experiences, so.
Well, that's because they've got debts that prevent them to do all those things for college.
Well, it's also an
What
aesthetic, it's a minimalist sort of aesthetic.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the fancy free and not being rooted and rent your car, you know, do Zipcar, have an apartment and be able to be a little bit more mobile. The other thing is touching on what Danny said is understanding the sort of the crossovers between having a diverse sort of portfolio of things that you're doing. Because a person who's attending a talk that you're doing, or you teach their kid, you know, you don't know what sort of crossover you know, revenue streams that can create.
Because as you pointed out, they can be a client for something else that you sell or make.
Yep.
At a totally different price point than what you originally went to them for. There's also this whole world of business to business, and actually I guess, Tim, that's part of what you're looking at too, is this corporate gift concept of can we make a line of gifts that corporations give to their employees. So rather than having a product that would be in a retail store or that would be online, it's an actual product that gets sold to a business. And for you all, that is absolutely something else to be thinking about too, is there a way to get a corporate client who has a need, you know, thinking about brooms and cleaning services and, I don't know, weird high-end cleaning services who want to say that they have a handmade broom that is coming to clean your house. I don't know, I'm just making that up right now, but the possibility is there. To think about how the client and the customer that you're talking about isn't just somebody who walks into a retail store. So knowing who your customer is that you want to go after and where you want to spend your time is actually pretty important. Franchising, McDonald's is the easiest. Any of the store or the restaurants right up there, you can buy for a small fee. You can't apparently though buy Bill Strickland's schools as a franchise. You can only raise all the money on your own, and they give you a model and then they walk away, which could be frightening. So we started to talk about this licensing piece. Do you remember this video? It's really it's really short, so I'm going to show it again because not everybody got to see it. And let's see if I can make it work without losing it. Oops, sorry. So, how many of you have heard of Mary Englebright? Not too many. Okay. Really? Apparently you and Tim were the only ones.
No, I think
and okay. So Mary Englebright is an artist.
Famous.
I'm sorry?
Famous.
A very famous artist who has made millions and millions and millions of dollars, and you'll probably recognize her stuff when I show this one. But she is a licensing fanatic. Everything she draws turns into some sort of product, and she figured it out early, and this year she is celebrating her 40th year of the first time that she licensed something. And this is on her website. Like, she's really proud of this.
I mean, she cross-stitch stuff. She paint. I mean, that's where
It's insane how much was made out of her brand. So,
she's always got an Emmy in a square. You can help it. Yes.
all right, so here, check this one out. Now, we can't all be Mary Englebright, and nor would we want to be. And this whole issue of style and how things go in and out of style, like this was a huge thing in the 80s and into the 90s. And then, you know, I think the same people who bought them originally, like my mom has a ridiculous number of prints of Mary Englebright. But here's what is really interesting. I'm going to pull out of here is to see where this woman's career went, because she is from St. Louis, and last year, or two years ago, when Ferguson happened, she made some really interesting choices and got a whole bunch of interesting feedback, and is, I think, a way to think about licensing and a way to realize that just because you're reproducing things over and over again doesn't mean that you can't have a voice, and that you can't, you know, use your art in ways that still have meaning. So let's take a look at this.